Welcome to Find Your Voice. This show is where we interview thought leaders and our newest clients on their journeys that they've been through in their life and their expertise and their insights to inspire and educate. And today we have Dr. Agnieszka Piotrowska. She's a founder and CEO and has a PhD in psychoanalysis and ethics in films, award-winning filmmaker, academic, and certified life coach. Welcome to the Find Your Voice podcast. How are you doing today?
Yes, no, wonderful. Good to see you. And thank you, yes, for talking to me. It's interesting, the minute you introduced me, that the whole issue of kind of complicated identity comes up, because in various academic settings, of course, the first thing people would say is this is Professor Agnieszka Piotrowska, an academic and an academic writer and a scholar. Whereas, of course, you introduce me differently, which is fine because I'm all these things. And I think this is one of the wonderful things about life. And I think I feel very strongly that it's wonderful to accept one's complicated identities rather than just saying I'm just this one thing. And that's incredibly, I think, limiting.
Yes, 100%. I totally agree. And I'm glad that you've kind of introduced yourself as well in that way, because obviously you've worn many hats, filmmaker, academic, and psychotherapist, and now you're a life coach. So how have these expertise and experiences shape the message you bring to the world today?
Yeah, I think it looks kind of complicated, but fundamentally, I've always been interested in talking to people, recognizing who they are, recognizing their identity, attempting then to bring their voices and my own, of course, as a creative person, to the world. And then in terms of the documentary film project, and I always talk to everybody about it, my students, my mentees and clients, what I have been able to do is exactly the same mechanism. So see what the issue is, what the person is about, recognize their strengths and weaknesses. But the documentary project, of course, relies on creating a piece of work, which is in part a construction to show to the world. So it's a spectacle. So its intention could be the best intention in the world, but fundamentally we're making a piece of work which then has to work for the audiences as well as the person that you're talking to, right? Whereas in terms of psychotherapy, life coaching, mentorship, your focus is directly on the human being that you're working with. So it's wonderful because it's very rewarding in a different way. And I think this kind of notion of how creativity can help you, if you are my client, to what extent your own creativity can be a tool for your own empowerment is something I'm really interested in.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. So the Scholars Mentor Initiative, can you tell me a bit more about that? It focuses on empowering international research students. So what inspired this?
I mean, the Scholars Mentor, the way, if you look up at the website, it's like a business card and it says various things kind of in a way simply. I mean, it's a lot of words, then a lot of photographs and a lot of pictures. But yes, we want to empower research students, particularly international research students, in their journey using holistic approaches, which means various tools, including classic psychotherapeutic tools, but also very much shifting mindset, using meditation and spiritual tools so that they can achieve their goals and develop in the way they want to develop. On the website, we don't talk particularly about overcoming trauma, childhood trauma and other difficulties coming from that period of time and transgenerational trauma. But it's something that I am also working with clients with and about, and particularly women, and often very successful women who notice that they hit against obstacles to do with that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I feel passionate about. And again, empowering people to find their own creativity voices, but also the sense of stepping into their genius, as now is the kind of fashion way of saying it. But it is true, trying to focus on your strengths rather than weaknesses going forward.
Yes, no, that's really interesting. And you mentioned about trauma and creativity, and your documentary work, Married to the Eiffel Tower, explores trauma through a creative lens. So how can creativity help individuals reframe and heal from their past?
Joe, it's it's quite funny because Married to the Eiffel Tower is something, it's a piece of work that everybody mentions when they talk to me in terms of documentary. And it's almost annoying because I've made lots of other award-winning documentaries and also now experimental work and fiction. And yet this is something that people really remember. What's interesting and maybe important in terms of the Married to the Eiffel Tower as a piece of work is that the contributors themselves, so the women themselves, the women who talk about their particular predilection, if you like, for falling in love with objects rather than people, if you look at it carefully, they have used their own creativity, and I will explain in what way, to combat their own traumas and suffering of various sorts, including childhood traumas, feeling rejected, maybe sexual traumas. And whilst they don't necessarily choose to say this is a defense mechanism, it clearly to a certain extent is, they all seem to be, in my experience, really very creative people. They make wonderful models, so they are artistic. They are very good writers. They write poems to these objects. So you can also see how, to a certain extent, they create a reality in which they can function fairly well, despite a variety of things which maybe in another circumstance could have led to a breakdown. But you can, of course, making a film, any film, or creating a theatre play, because I've done this as well. It's a wonderful, empowering kind of activity for those involved,
Right.
performers, directors, everybody, and of course the audience. In terms of working with clients, mentees, I have found that using creativity, both in terms of how people think about themselves and the world, and rewriting, of course, the story that they tell themselves about themselves, is a wonderful tool.
Hmm. And that's interesting. You mentioned about ethics, storytelling as well, and because you've researched the ethics of documentary filmmaking, and what's the balance in telling a compelling story and respecting the subject's experience and dignity?
All filmmakers, we all want to feel that, our intentions are pure and that we want to stand by our contributors and their voices and produce something that the world will appreciate and also respect people we work with, everybody. However, the research shows that despite these best intentions, and this is not at all just my work or contemporary work, but historically, so some of the most famous documentaries in the world, for example, Errol Morris's Thin Blue Line, which actually, in the course of documentary, he spends a long time with somebody who says he's accused unfairly for murder, and that person eventually gets released. So it's so wonderful. And then that person sues Errol Morris for rights to their life story. Right. Something in which, through the process, he felt disempowered. And this can happen. So in terms of the ethics of the documentary filmmaking, it depends really who is in charge of the artistic choices, how you tell the story, and who edits the film. So the issue of how, in documentary filmmaking, this really was actually my PhD thesis, the issue of how those who give you their stories then feel about the finished product is the key issue. In my own work, for example, recently I saw contributors to a documentary I did for Channel 4 some time ago called Trapped by My Twin, about two Dutch women artists who were extremely too close, twins, identical twins. They then developed an eating disorder. They were completely sharing the food exactly, and they were so almost in love with each other that also stopped doing other things. And we spent, I think, between 6 to 9 months with them. We were filming their lives. We were talking to them nonstop, like the psychotherapist. It was very difficult on myself and my team, extremely difficult. the piece of work I think was really good. It launched Cutting Edge. I mean, that series of Cutting Edge at the time, everything was wonderful. And then years went by, and I saw these people 10 years or 12 years after the making of the film, and they came to London and they said they wanted to talk to me for me to make an update, which I shall not be making, because I think it's difficult to do a very ethical piece of work like with people who are troubled. And they said they enjoyed the process. They did not enjoy the reactions to the film. So they didn't even particularly, they liked the film well enough when it was first made. They didn't like how people reacted, because what people saw is two people who are very troubled with mental health issues. And so they felt this is not how they want to be perceived. And this is the core of the matter. However much you try, if you don't know what people are going to say. You never know. I don't know what people are going to say, but I tell you, but it's my call. It's my decision to give you this interview and then decide what is going to be produced. But if you're taking in a documentary, which is very heavily edited, then all kinds of things can go wrong. And then people somehow feel often that they've lost ownership, not just over the piece of work that you're making, but rather over their lives.
Right, of course.
In the famous Errol Morris story, I have a blank about his name, because I think it's such a dreadful story, really. So the Randall Dale Adams was convicted of murder. He always said it was unfair and not just. He didn't do it. He was on this death row. Errol Morris made this famous film, Thin Blue Line. He, through a variety of things, managed to prove that person was innocent, and yet he then turned onto him because he felt he took his life away. He may have given him his actual physical life, which you and I would think, my God, this is a pretty good achievement, huh? But he took away his chance of telling his own story. And so he takes him to court, and eventually they settle. But their relationship, which should have survived, should have been very close, was sort of fallen apart. Whereas, of course, in terms of mentoring people, instead of life coaching people, instead of offering support, maybe psychotherapeutic support, it's completely different. Because whatever happens between you and your client, first of all, is confidential, is private. And so it's very different also from, for example, PhD supervision in an academic setting. It's meant to be completely different, because you are supporting the person, their growth, their mindset in a variety of complicated ways, hopefully including tools which you wouldn't necessarily include in a purely academic setting, including things like meditation, setting out, writing out what goals you have or you might have, not just in terms of your academic journey, but in terms of your journey as a human being, right?
Of course. No, that's great. Really interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. So life coaching versus academia. So as someone who's kind of spanned works of academia to now life coaching, what would you say is how you blend your intellectual side with the personal growth space?
So in terms of my own, my own identity, my own space, I do a lot of writing. I do both academic writing, and now, of course, I have also written a book which directly supports the initiative. So the book is going to be called The Scholar's Mentor's Guide to Global Success for International Students. And in it, I present a variety of my ideas how to help people. I present this methodology called the LION methodology, which simply L for learning, I for inspiration, O for organization of your mind as well, and for next steps, but also navigation of the life, post academia. So I present all these ideas, and in terms of organizing your mind as well is very important, that you have some control over what thoughts turn up in your head, that you know that thoughts do shape reality, and certainly the way how you feel about the world. So, there's some things in terms of the book and in terms of my work with the clients and mentees, which is different. I think that's my unique position in this, in terms of particularly supporting research students and international research students in particular, that I have done it. I know what I'm talking about. I both, of course, have a PhD myself, but also I have supervised many formally. I have 10 completions, which is quite a lot, given that I've only been in the academy for 12 years, which isn't a very long time given how much work it is to supervise people. But also informally, and this is like a very large number of people who have come to me for help even before I formally set out this initiative. Before I became a life coach, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've got some questions myself actually for this, because when it comes to sleep, so I'm really curious, because personally I've had issues where I wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and I'm thinking about or stressing over things that I wouldn't normally stress over. So is that a common pattern with a lot of people, that they call it the witching hour, don't they? Where people wake up in the middle of the night and they start overthinking. Is there something that you can recommend, or is that some sort of behavior that is an issue that could be corrected with your kind of methods?
Well, definitely. Well, first of all, if we were working together, if you were my client, the first thing you'd always do is try and find out carefully who the person is who you are working with and talking to. Why is it? I mean, the classic thing when people wake up in the night is anxiety. So, what is it happening in your life which is making you anxious, which is making you insecure? It could be a variety of things. People typically are anxious about their future. Typically, they could be also anxious about that their goals are in some kind of conflict with the goals of those who are next to them, so their partners or lovers. This is super fun because we all want to, we want to be in good relationships. We want to have somebody who loves us, and we want to do our best. Most nice people. So, and sometimes, in fact, it is more common than you think. There's some, even in good relationships, that people have slightly different timescales, different goals for the next few years. And this can be incredibly anxiety making, because you think, and now what? But in terms of, so what I do, but I'm sure many other coaches, is you establish what are the most important things for you. So because I'm a Mind Valley trained life coach, so of course, and I think they're great. So some of the methodology I use from them, which is we establish the 3 most important questions before anything else happens, which is what you want to experience in life, how you want to grow still, and you have to write it all out, and how you want to contribute to the world. And then we work on achieving that. In terms of the basic thing which can make anybody feel better very quickly, it is two things, and you will know that. One you will know, which is exercise, physical exercise, going for, I say to people, because people often say, students say, I can't go for a walk or to the gym because I have to work on my thesis. I have to stay on my computer. I said, no. Of course you have to work on your thesis, but go out, go for a walk, go for a run, do something else. You have to, and don't drink alcohol. Not when you're in state of anxiety. Absolutely not. But also in terms of meditation. So this whole thing about meditation is a big thing. And obviously, I think people in an academic setting, if I said to a student, let's go meditate, I'm sure the powers that be would think this is very strange. And yet, in most there are different types of meditation, of course, but you can still find time. I mean, I'm a 6-phase meditation trained person now. These are short relatively short meditations, like 20 minutes. Once you get into it, you should do it at the beginning of the day. And if somehow it doesn't work out, then at the end of the day, then I think you definitely would help with your sleep. But the sleep issues are usually a symptom of something else going on that's, an underlying issue that needs sorting out. But in my experience, it can be sorted out quite quickly.
Interesting. Well, a lot of people I know are the same with it, and it seems to affect us when we get a bit older as well. We're in our sort of mid to late 30s and stuff. It starts to affect us more with sleep. But again, it's probably maybe the stresses of life, as you say.
And also, it might be the stresses just of being on this planet currently.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all are a little anxious, So the question, how do I contribute to the world? It's really is a big question, because there's also people can feel, I think, a sense of helplessness.
Yeah.
And yet, of course, it's very important to know that even small steps can have a ripple effect. And as long as you have your goal out ahead of you, more or less, and if it is for the highest good of all, then hopefully things will work out in a positive way. But, as always, remember, like on the plane, you have to put a mask on first before you help other people is the same. No point contributing to the world if you're collapsing yourself. So you have to get yourself in a positive state to begin with, definitely. So I just wanted to say that a lot of so my PhD is in psychoanalysis and film, and it's about very much unconscious mechanism that happen in the documentary encounter, but obviously it happened in any other encounters in the world, in life. Now, traditionally, life coaching uses a little bit of psychoanalytical tools, but not many, because the whole idea is to get quick results. Whereas in my practice, I having learned, and as I say, I very much have enjoyed my training, and I'm doing another qualification with Authentic Living in America, which is more spiritual, and we can talk about it in a minute. But I like to combine my knowledge of the academia. So if we're talking about international students who come from different territories to an English-speaking country, UK and US very much, then I think the use of psychoanalytical tools alongside with mind coaching tools, I believe, is very helpful.
Yes, very much so. It's a huge adjustment for people coming from a very different culture, and to come to a Western culture and get used to the way people are and the way that how different society is, let alone the language barrier side as well.
Also, in terms of my experience of different cultures and working as a filmmaker and an academic in different cultures, is kind of quite quickly. And I've done a lot of work in Zimbabwe, both over the number of years, both as a filmmaker and as an educator and as an academic as well. What you will notice, two things. One is that cultural difference to begin with can feel overwhelming. Even for somebody like myself, who is British, who spent most of my life in the UK, there are some ways in which I would say things are done differently in Poland or Central Europe compared to the UK, and yet it's more or less the same culture. So imagine coming from a completely different culture to the UK, for example, and US, where educational system can be very different, the expectations can be very different, people can feel lonely. I mean, the statistics of international students and how they feel in this country, in the US, there's staggering statistics, and they're not particularly well publicized. Like, did you know that there's research which says that 70% of international students, both research and undergraduate and at the MA level, 70% of international students in UK and US have felt lonely, homesick, and it has often led to mental health issues, which then needed proper big intervention. So my kind of what we're trying to do at Scholars Mentor is to try and catch it before these things become serious mental health issues. So noticing a sense of, as you say, anxieties, sleeplessness, lack of focus, lack of knowledge of where your life purpose is. That's the key thing. What is your life purpose? If you can establish, at least in general terms, where do you want to be in 3 years' time? And how can I then help you, not to make a film, but to help you as a human? It's greatly empowering as well. It's fun. For me, but to feel you've helped another human being really to grow and develop, it's greatly rewarding, for sure.
Yes, no, definitely. I totally agree. Well, it's another interesting thing that is kind of I want to talk to you about is you've critiqued the manifestation trend and then the oversimplifying systematic issues. How can we pursue the abundance without kind of ignoring the real world?
I'm laughing because it's incredibly, we know it's incredibly fashionable now to talk about this, the manifesting. So I want something, let me manifest it. And people do vision boards and God knows what. And then is this whole thing of thinking, the universe will always help me. I mean, I do believe in benevolent universe. I do believe in spirituality. I do think it's extremely helpful to, as I mentioned many times already in our conversation, to be very positive, to think in positive ways and steps going forward. But I think that one has to be careful about imagining that just because you set this intention, that somehow if you don't succeed, or if you are in some difficulty, which is a great difficulty to do, for example, with the fact where you're with societal limitations and structures, that somehow it's your fault. That's my problem with it. Because if you're taking it seriously, if you're going to say, you can manifest whatever you like, you can really create whatever reality you want, then the next question is, well, why on earth are you not then, if not rich, then well off? Why have you not created it? There's obviously something wrong with you. And then my problem is that there's these kind of there are ways of doing it properly in which you try and fight your limiting beliefs, fight for rules that maybe society and your family gives you, fight all kinds of limitations internally and work towards your goals. Also spirituality, and obviously helping achieve your aspirations, and be grateful for all kinds of wonderful experiences that come your way. But to say the homeless person in the street, clearly there's something wrong with their limiting beliefs and rules. That's why down the street, I think, is horrendous potential. And neoliberal and capitalist in the worst way. No, sometimes things go wrong in life, and however much manifest, the abundance is maybe not quite so quickly forthcoming as you would like. And I feel really, really strongly about it, because I think something that, and you read these because I'm a researcher, so I read this kind of these platforms in which people say, spend more, thousands more, and this will lead somewhere. It might, but we don't have the thousands. Don't spend the thousands on something or other. Pay the rent. And literally people say, I would like to join this course. I would like to do this. I'd like to join this business container. But I have to think but I have $37.50 in my bank account. Yesterday I saw it. And somebody says, oh, have faith and trust, borrow the money, jump onto the container. No, that is immoral, literally. Wait. But I think it's very easy to be misunderstood here. I do believe it's good to practice radical gratitude. Radical gratitude is this idea that you're grateful for whatever experiences that come your way because you learn from them, and you can grow your mindset, right?
Yes. Oh, definitely.
I think that's well, absolutely. I think that there's a couple of roots, and this is another whole thing. Why I'm such a great believer in education is that sometimes, a lot of the time, education is the only route out of various situations, particularly in societies, patriarchal societies in which class plays, a pivotal role still, of course, patriarchy and so on. And education is the route in which can take you out of these limitations, without a doubt. You still need to try and, the kind of another fashionable thing is raise your vibration. What does it mean? Of course, you'll raise your vibration if you go for a run. The sun is shining. If I go out there, I promise you, I will immediately be raising my vibration. That's great. But if you have some kind of major issue in your life, if you have a success in your life, if you and these various setbacks happen, then it's not going to be so easy to be raising your vibration, is it? And then, as I say, my problem with it is that you mustn't be made feel bad and guilty that you haven't somehow manifested this abundance or whatever it is. However, I do feel, I have to say, it's slightly against myself, that was, I think, putting pictures on the wall as a manifestation without doing the work is not going to work, I'm telling you, 100%. But if you focus on your goals, your inner strength, your mindset, and also not abuse your body, and you have a very good chance of raising the vibration and achieving your goals. I'm not sure manifesting is just journaling in some kind of resolute way towards your goals. I also wanted to say that I think experimenting is very important, both in life and in higher education. Unfortunately, in higher education, and certainly in the UK, and certainly in my experience, even fairly recently, people say all sorts of words come out of their mouths in terms of management at universities, but in fact, people are fearful of experimentation because they're fearful of true creativity. And why? Because true creativity can question status quo, which is, of course, frightening for people. But you have to everything to be raising your vibration and thinking out of the boxes and thinking about what else can I do? What else can I do to create things? It's like, there are basic things you can do. It's not just one thing that you have to focus on.
No, definitely. Well, talking more on the therapeutic kind of route as well, it says, the subjects in your films, like you mentioned earlier about the twins trapped by my twin, describing the process is therapeutic. How do you navigate the line between filmmaking and healing? So what's the filmmaking side, the healing side, would you say?
You can't. Basically, you can only really be therapeutic a little bit finally to the end if you share the control over the final product. So if the people you work with also control the edit and control what happens in the film. Otherwise, it's still your film and you will make all these decisions, and then you simply do not know how people are going to feel about it. And even if they do like it, like the twins, then they still cannot control the audience. So what I think, rather, you could say that some of the experiences and techniques that I have learned during my career as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, in terms of storytelling, reframing narratives, and then thinking, how can an experience which is a bad experience lead to gaining more clarity, and therefore gaining, making you feel more confident in yourself, and therefore be more successful, and therefore manifesting some kind of success. How can that in a life coaching environment? There's some, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think the last question I've got. So the vision for the future, what where do you see your work making the biggest impact in the next 5 years?
I mean, people, many gurus in the world and great thinkers say, if you've impacted one person's life positively, if you've changed one person's life positively, you're doing well, and you can congratulate yourself. So I'm congratulating myself because, a number of particularly PhD students who are even on my website, the Scholars Mentor thing, say that I have positively influenced their lives because now their lives have gone in a different way. So I feel very happy already, and I feel very happy with various decisions that I've made, walking away from toxic situations at some places and experiencing the world. I would like to travel more, not as a tourist, but to different places, institutions, which I've started doing already, sharing the knowledge and expertise that I have, both in terms of creative work, filmmaking, but also in terms of supporting people. This is definitely my vision. I am very much looking forward to writing more. I love it, both academic writing and other types of writing, other books and things. And of course, working both one-to-one creatively with different clients, mentees, students, and to a certain extent continuing as I am at the minute part-time in higher education. And very much, in terms of my personal goals, I do focus on my career and work, and always have done, and aim to continue to be a lifelong learner, which of course is a creative activity and will keep you young forever if you keep doing it. In exercise and and I really am kind of into it as well, and both running and some swimming and gym things. But also, and this is very important, I mean, everybody's different and no judgment, but for me, career, exercise, life learning has to go in the same step as my relationship with my family and friends. So being in a community and contributing to this community and then taking nourishment from it, and is something that is definitely part of my own vision for the future.
That's great. Thank you very much. No, I really appreciate that. And it's been a wonderful conversation. And Agnieszka, it's very good to talk to you. And I very much look forward to hearing you on podcasts, working with us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.